over the past 3 episodes, we've taken you through our employee value proposition, and you've likely identified a range of exciting actions that you're wanting to take to build on your own employee value proposition and also the culture in your business. Getting there, however, might feel like a bit of a challenge. And the reason for that is because it involves change. And we're funny creatures. Most of us don't really like change. It pushes us outside of our comfort zone. Sometimes we're not quite sure what's going to happen or even when it's going to happen. So change is definitely one of the more challenging aspects of growth to work through, because it does involve a little bit of being uncomfortable, a little bit of uncertainty. Sometimes we're going to get things wrong because, yes, we have to fail to get things right, but we're also going to do lots of right things as we're moving through those change programs. But one of the hardest things to change about our workplace culture is quite simply the current culture that we have. And that's because of all those funny wee embedded habits, patterns, and behaviours that govern how we do things around here. So welcome to our final and 8th episode on culture. And Kirsten and I are going to bring together the EVP and culture episodes. And for this session, we're going to be talking to you all about change. Because after all, we're seeking that absolutely positive response to that barbecue question. And what's it like to work there?
If we think about change, and I look at the change projects that I see when I go out on client sites, and Sarah, I'm sure you'll agree with this, is we quite often see when we go in a missing element, and that missing element is usually a people strategy around change. And so often, when I'm thinking back to different projects that I've been involved in or I've seen happen, and what I often see is you've had a project team that have been working on a project for quite a long time, and so over that time they've become conditioned. The unfamiliar becomes familiar, and so it's no longer a change for them. If anything, they're actually getting excited because they can actually see that there's something amazing to happen at the end. However, where there's a disconnect so often is that when the comms go out to the actual team members and out to the greater group, the piece that's missing is they expect people to jump on board with that change in an instant and buy in. And then people get grumpy or concerned or frustrated because people are asking questions. They're saying, oh my goodness, people are being difficult. They're not getting on board quick enough. But the reason they're not getting on board quick enough is normally because we haven't taken into consideration the transition people need to go through when change occurs. So there's 2 main types of changes in there, really. There's the big change, which is quite dramatic. And then there's also the continuous improvement type change. And that quite often is what we're always wanting to really instill in really good cultures and good organisations, that we're always looking for different ways to improve. When we're talking about change, change is about driving behaviour. And if we think about behaviour, the majority of what we do every single day is automatic. So just by telling someone we're now going to embark in a month's time on this new platform, or we're now about to launch XYZ product, and expect them all of a sudden to change their way of working or their way of thinking or their way of speaking, is actually inappropriate and not acceptable. So what we need to make sure that we do is actually put that people part into it. And if we think about change to me is very situational. It's external. And then we've got the transition, and the transition is the opposite. So we usually have that change piece sorted, the situational piece. What we have missing though is the transition piece. So transition is quite often, a good way to think about it is how people are reacting internally. So it's the psychological factors that people go through when they're experiencing change. And one of my absolute favourite things to look at when anyone's going through a change project, and it's been around for a really long time, but you know what? Still so powerful today, is Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. And, he talks about, the animation, Two Little Mice, two little men, and it's about the 4 different ways people handle change. If you are going through change yourself, or your organisation is, or you're on a project, for the sake of a quick read or a quick watch on YouTube, is actually pull out Who Moved My Cheese, because it talks about those 4 different ways people handle change, what sort of signals they'll be giving you, what sort of mindset they'll be having, and it'll also give you ideas of how you can actually work with these people to move them forward. So just to sort of finish up, another action that I'd love to share with you is actually around making sure you don't lose momentum. And one of the easiest ways to do that is when you're looking at people going through change is you're going to do what we call a risk analysis or a barrier analysis. And basically that's quite an easy T-bar. And it's where you put all your risks and barriers down one side, and then probably you guessed it, on the other side of the T-bar, you look at every barrier that you're finding your team are likely to put up or they're likely to feel, and you actually put how could you mitigate that or eliminate that, how could you work with that, so you're actually front footing it. And as we've been going through the culture series, Sarah and I have been sharing with you amazing ways to engage your team. When you're going through change, don't lose that. Make sure that you actually take a people-focused approach to change. And with all these different tips and tactics that we've been sharing with you, they'll actually enable you to step forward. So please remember, when you're going through change, make sure you've got a transition people part in your strategy.
And so what we thought would be useful to share with you is a very quick overview of a model that you can use for actually implementing those amazing change projects you've got in your business. And the first part that we look at, as Kirsten's just been talking over and over and over about, is your stakeholders. So really getting to understand who they are and mapping out those stakeholders. But not just that, also really understanding what role they're going to play in your change project as well. You know, is the person imperative to success? Are they a must-have on the project because actually the project can't evolve and be completed without them? Are they somebody who's a bystander? So they're neutral. You do it. If they don't, they don't. They're actually neither here nor there, but they're probably quite easy to bring on the journey anyway. Are they somebody who's going to be resistant to change? And actually identifying the why that sits alongside it will be really useful for other parts of the model that I'll be talking to you about. And who are your champions? You know, their champions are the drivers of change. You know, they're the people that are incredibly enthusiastic and they're always going to be going the extra mile to get those projects over the line. And then, of course, we're looking for helpers, the people that are not necessarily the drivers or the champions, but they're always going to be there. They're always going to be willing to support and enable change to take place in the business. So map out those stakeholders and the roles that they're going to play. And then we want to have a think about how we're going to consider motivating those stakeholders along the way. And there's two areas we'd like you to think about. The first is around the head. So what we're thinking around with this is what are the implications for success and what are the implications for failure? So talking more at a more logical level. And then we're going to look at the heart. So what's in it for me? So what does it look like if we achieve success in this? And actually what's desirable? What's the best outcome that we could possibly achieve? And map that against your stakeholders as well. And then we have to think about how we're communicating change. And this is an ongoing process, right from when you're engaging your stakeholders, right through to a completion of that change process. So we're talking about understanding who your audience is, what you're communicating, when you're communicating it, who's communicating it, at what times, and how that's being pulled together and what that looks like. It's a big piece of work, but again, if you can map it against your stakeholders, you can get some really powerful outcomes in terms of bringing people on the journey and not leaving them behind, as Kirsten's just shared. And then, of course, we need to keep people engaged. We want to keep them excited. So we've got to keep remembering to share that vision and keep people engaged in what the outcome is that we're trying to achieve. And making sure that we're linking what that communication looks like so people are constantly reminded about what the organisation outcome is, but actually how that relates to them as an individual. And it comes back to that what's in it for me. So it's a really powerful tool to use. And so you can go ahead and use that in any of your change projects. And there's always one action that you can use, and you feel free to take this away. And it's the 5 whys, and you may well be familiar with it, but when you're reaching people who are saying no, it's not necessarily no, it's why. There's an objection for a reason, and working through that why process and discovering why that's actually happening is an incredibly powerful tool to use that you can take away and apply to any aspect of your business today.
Wow. That was an action-packed episode, and I really hope over this 8-episode series we have given you a lot of practical and proactive hacks that you can actually implement immediately. And if we just have a look at what we've covered today, it's about making sure that we always put people in the absolute center of everything we do within our organizations. Let's bring everything that we quite often offer into that EVP. Let's make sure we create an inclusive culture where everyone has a sense of belonging. They are high performers, they're performing to the level, and they have very clear expectations. You have an amazing vision that everyone is aspiring to. Go well. Go through all of the different episodes, look at the practical exercises that we have, and we look forward to seeing you in our next series